How old are you right now? Which city do you call home? Do you watch these stories late at night, when the streets outside are quiet? Or do you play them in the middle of your day, sunlight filling your room? Think about that, because tonight's story does not care what time it is on your clock. It cares about memory. It cares about fire. It cares about silence. And before we walk into the flames of 1853, into a Mardi Gras night that ended in ashes, I need you to drop a comment telling me where you are watching from and what time it is over there. And don't forget to subscribe, because stories like this are not just told, they are carried. Now, February 1853, South Carolina. The sky is heavy with clouds, swollen and slow. The pines groan under the wind. The smell of damp earth mixes with wood smoke curling from chimneys. Mardi Gras does not belong here. It is a borrowed celebration, a mask worn by a place that knows only chains. Yet the masters wear their feathers and satin, their beads and ribbons, as if laughter can drown out history. The house rises out of the earth like arrogance made wood and stone. The big house, painted white but already peeling, its great columns streaked by rain. To the slaves it is a monument to cruelty. To the Beaumont family it is pride, wealth, permanence. They call it the big house, but it is really a stage, and every stage needs fire someday. Dinah moves through its halls. Dinah, 24 years old, skin the color of polished chestnut, shoulders broad from years of lifting pots and firewood. A scar curls down her left forearm, gift from an iron skillet that slipped years ago when she was barely a girl. Her hair is wrapped in a faded cloth, her bare feet silent on the wooden floor. She has learned silence as a language. Dinah does not cry. Dinah does not beg. Dinah remembers. She carries a tray through the dining hall. The room smells of roasted pork, buttered corn, hot bread. The walls are lined with portraits, stern-faced Beaumont men painted in oils, watching their descendants with hollow eyes. Silver glitters on the long table. Guests laugh too loud, drunk already, though the night is still young. Dinah keeps her eyes low but her ears open. She always listens. Richard Beaumont sits at the head, 50 years old, red-faced, a man who chews tobacco between his teeth and spits into brass cups. His wife, Charlotte, sits stiffly beside him, her pearls resting like cold bones against her neck. Their children, Henry, age 12, Annabel, age 9, Thomas, age 6, play with ribbons and masks, their laughter sharp as glass. And then there is Clyde Harper, the overseer. Lean, whipcord thin, eyes like wet stones. His whip is never far from reach, even tonight, even during celebration. His presence fills the air heavier than smoke. Dinah moves past them all. She sets down the tray. She turns away, invisible almost. The sound of fiddles drifts in from the veranda where more guests dance. Mardi Gras has been twisted to fit this land, a mix of New Orleans finery and Carolina cruelty. Masks painted bright red, gold, and green cover faces flushed with wine. The smell of gunpowder from fireworks lingers in the air, though no spark has yet been lit. For Dinah, Mardi Gras means nothing. Only more food to cook, more spills to clean, more laughter to endure. She does not think of masks. She thinks of names: Isaac, Mariah, Ruth. She remembers Isaac, her brother, dragged from the field by Clyde Harper, his back cut open for running too fast, smiling too wide. She remembers little Mariah, fever burning her body while the big house ignored her cries. She remembers Ruth, her grandmother, telling stories of a river wider than Carolina, until one winter she fell and they left her where she lay. Dinah carries these names like coals in her chest. And tonight the coals glow brighter. The quarters down the slope are hushed. Families sit in the dark, some humming low songs, some rocking children to sleep. The smell of pine smoke rises, bitter and thin. They know Mardi Gras means noise in the big house and silence in the cabins. But silence is never empty. Silence holds memory. Silence waits. The big house has never been so alive. Its windows blaze with candlelight. Music, laughter, and clinking glasses spill into the night air. The fields lie dark, sleeping under the weight of winter, but the house pulses with excess. Dinah moves from kitchen to hall, from hall to pantry, her muscles aching, her head low. She is a servant in their eyes, but she is more, because Dinah does not just carry trays, she carries maps. She knows the house better than the family itself. She knows which doors creak, which stairs moan, which shutters stay loose in the wind. She knows where the kerosene is stored, how quickly pine catches flame, how long before smoke fills the upstairs rooms. Knowledge is a tool, and tools are weapons, but not yet. Not tonight. Tonight is only the beginning. Tonight she watches. She listens. She remembers. Charlotte Beaumont complains that the bread is too hard. Richard roars with laughter at a cruel joke about a runaway strung from a tree. Clyde Harper boasts of breaking Isaac with his whip, his hand slamming the table as he tells the story like a victory. Dinah's hands clench against the tray, but her face is calm, her eyes down. She does not cry. She just remembers. Annabelle drops her ribbon on the floor. Dinah stoops, picks it up, places it back in the girl's hand. Their fingers brush. Annabelle wrinkles her nose as if Dinah's skin were dirt. Dinah says nothing, but the memory presses deeper. The guests toast to Mardi Gras, they toast to wealth. They toast to the big house standing another 100 years. Dinah pours the wine, red like blood, watching it swirl into crystal glasses. Not because she is a servant, but because she is waiting. Because every drop is a reminder. Because time is slower in silence. Outside, the wind rattles the shutters. Somewhere in the trees, an owl cries. The moon slides from behind clouds, pale and watchful. Dinah steps into the kitchen. She feels the weight of the iron pots, the warmth of the fire still burning in the hearth. She feels the silence pressing in, thick as smoke. The big house thinks tonight belongs to it. But Dinah knows the truth. The house is already wood, already dry, already waiting for fire. This is not just a celebration. It is a funeral dressed in feathers. Mardi Gras in South Carolina, 1853, will not end with laughter. It will end with silence. It will end with smoke. It will end with Dinah. And she does not cry. She just remembers. The past is never past. It clings like smoke in hair, like ash on skin. For Dinah, the past was not a story. It was a wound. And wounds that never heal only wait for fire. She was born in 1829, in the quarters that leaned like broken teeth at the edge of the Beaumont plantation. Born into chains, into silence, into the rhythm of labor. Her mother, Sarah, was a seamstress, forced to stitch gowns for Charlotte Beaumont. Her father, Samuel, worked in the fields until he collapsed one harvest and never rose again. Dinah learned early that grief was not an interruption. It was the air itself. The quarters smelled always of smoke and sweat. Mud floors, thin blankets, children coughing through the night. Songs hummed low, almost whispers, carrying memory of rivers far away, drums never heard again. Dinah grew up listening. Her grandmother Ruth told her stories by the fire, stories of Africa, of a sky so wide it swallowed pain, of lions and rivers and freedom. Ruth's voice shook with age, but her eyes burned bright. "Remember, child," she whispered. "Remember, because remembering is a kind of freedom." Dinah remembered. She remembered the winter her father died, his body stiff in the dirt while the overseer Clyde Harper called him lazy. She remembered her mother's hands trembling as she stitched dresses of silk while her own child wore rags. She remembered hunger gnawing her belly, the sound of chains dragging through the night as men were punished. She remembered the whip cracking across backs until flesh opened. She remembered silence after screams, silence heavier than sound. And she remembered Isaac, her brother, strong, tall, with a grin that dared the world. He could lift twice his weight, could sing louder than the whip's crack. He was light in the darkness. He told Dinah once, "We ain't born for chains." Remember that, Dinah. We ain't born for chains. Isaac's laughter was dangerous. Richard Beaumont hated it. Clyde Harper feared it. One morning Isaac ran. Not far. Just to the edge of the pine grove, just for the feeling of wind in his lungs. They caught him. They dragged him back. Dinah saw it. She saw Clyde Harper raise the whip. She saw Isaac's back open under the leather. She saw blood spray like fire sparks. She saw Richard Beaumont smile as if cruelty were a lesson. And she saw Isaac's eyes burning with rage even as his body broke. 2 days later, Isaac was gone. They said he died of fever. Dinah knew he died of cruelty. His laughter silenced. His body buried without prayer. Dinah remembered. She always remembered. Then came Mariah. Little Mariah, with her gap-toothed smile, her bare feet kicking dust. She was Dinah's cousin, barely 8 years old. She danced when fiddles played, even if the song was only a hum from tired lips. She laughed in a way that made pain softer. But one summer, fever swept the quarters. Children burned hot with sickness. Their cries filled the night. No doctor came. No medicine was given. The big house closed its doors while Mariah lay gasping. Dinah held her, whispered stories Ruth had told her, wiped sweat from her brow. But the fever won. Mariah's small body stilled. The world grew quieter, crueler. Dinah buried her in shallow earth behind the quarters. No coffin, no marker, only memory. Dinah pressed her hand into the soil and swore she would not forget. Not Mariah, not Isaac, not anyone. And Ruth, old Ruth. Her voice was the root of memory. Her stories tied Dinah to a world beyond chains. But one icy morning, Ruth carried water from the well. Her legs gave out. She fell on the path, the bucket spilling, water freezing on the ground. No one came to help. The overseer laughed when he walked past her body. By nightfall she was gone. They buried her where she fell. Dinah stood over the grave, her heart turning harder. Silence thickened inside her. The big house told them these deaths meant nothing. That the quarters could lose 1 or 2 or 10, and the work would continue. But Dinah knew each name was fire: Isaac, Mariah, Ruth. Each name pressed deeper into her chest, each one another coal. Her mother, Sarah, stitched gowns through her tears. She warned Dinah to stay silent, to bow, to survive. "Survival is resistance," she whispered. But Dinah felt resistance building into something else. Survival was not enough. Not after Isaac, not after Mariah, not after Ruth. Years turned. Dinah grew into a woman, tall, silent, carrying scars both visible and hidden. She became the cook in the big house, forced to feed those who starved her family. She stirred pots of stew while remembering hunger. She roasted meat while remembering Isaac's back breaking under the whip. She polished silver while remembering Mariah's laughter. Each act was a reminder. Each act was a preparation. The past wounds never healed. They pulsed, steady, alive. She did not cry. She just remembered. Mardi Gras was only another insult. The Beaumonts draped themselves in silks and feathers, pretending at joy, pretending at nobility. They called it celebration. But to Dinah it was mockery. She watched Richard Beaumont boast, Charlotte sneer, Clyde laugh about broken bodies. She heard the names of Isaac and Mariah turned into jokes, into warnings. She kept her silence, but inside the silence grew heavy, sharp. Every scar on her arm, every hunger she endured, every burial she dug in the cold earth, each was a reason. Each was a flame. She did not think of revenge as a plan. It was not strategy. It was inevitability. A house built on blood must one day burn. Dinah knew the big house was wood. She knew kerosene burned fast. She knew fire climbed curtains and swallowed walls. She knew that memory needed a voice, and fire spoke louder than words. The past wounds became the present hunger. Isaac's laughter, Mariah's dance, Ruth's stories. They deserved more than silence. They deserved fire, and Dinah would be the hand to strike the match. Every ember waits for a breath. Every silence waits for a crack. Dinah's silence was long, heavy, stretched over years. But silence cannot last forever. The Beaumonts believed Mardi Gras would hide their sins. Masks, music, wine, laughter. They thought cruelty could be forgotten under feathers and beads. But Dinah knew better. Cruelty never vanishes. It clings like smoke to skin. It seeps into memory. It builds into weight. And weight always demands release. The breaking point came with a drop. Just one drop of red wine. It was late that night, February 1853. The house swelled with noise. Fiddles screeched on the veranda. Boots stomped on the wooden floors. The air smelled of pork fat, spilled liquor, cigar smoke. Candles flickered against silk gowns and polished buttons. Dinah moved among them, her tray balanced steady. Her feet were bare, her eyes lowered, her silence deep. Richard Beaumont slapped a cousin on the back, his voice booming. "To the Beaumont name," he shouted, spittle flying. Charlotte adjusted her pearls. Thin lips pressed tight as she scanned the room like a queen in her court. Clyde Harper leaned in the corner, whip coiled at his side even during celebration, eyes sharp as nails. Dinah approached. She poured wine into Charlotte's glass. A single drop slipped, staining Charlotte's gown. The room did not fall silent. Not yet, but Dinah felt every eye cut toward her. Charlotte gasped, her hand flying to her chest. The stain was small, hardly more than a coin. But her scream was sharp. "You clumsy girl!" Charlotte's hand cracked across Dinah's face. The sound cut through music. Heads turned. Laughter paused. Dinah's cheek burned, but she did not flinch. Richard roared with laughter. "Charlotte, the girl's too slow. She's dreaming again." Clyde smirked, spitting tobacco into a cup. "Better whip her tomorrow," he muttered. Dinah did not cry. She just lowered her head. She just remembered. Charlotte hissed again. "Clean it, girl. Do you hear me? Or you'll join your brother in the dirt." Isaac, the name struck harder than the slap. Dinah's hand trembled, not from pain but from memory. Isaac's back split open. Isaac's laughter silenced. Isaac buried in shallow earth. Something shifted inside her then, a silence breaking, a weight tipping. The air itself seemed to bend, heavy with inevitability. Dinah cleaned the stain. She bowed. She left the room. To them it was over. A servant disciplined, nothing more. To Dinah it was the moment the ember finally caught breath. She walked into the kitchen, hands steady now. The smell of grease hung heavy. The fire in the hearth glowed low. Her cheek throbbed, but her chest burned hotter. She stood there, breathing in smoke. She thought of Isaac. She thought of Mariah. She thought of Ruth. She thought of every slap, every whip, every hunger. And she understood. The house was wood. The curtains were cloth. The oil was plentiful. Fire was patient. Fire was memory made flesh. The breaking point was not Charlotte's slap. It was the insult. The invocation of Isaac's name as if his life were nothing, as if memory could be mocked. Dinah knew then silence was no longer enough. The big house believed it would stand another 100 years. Richard Beaumont boasted of it that very night. But Dinah saw its future. She saw charred beams, crumbling columns, smoke rising into dawn. She saw the walls collapse the way Isaac's body had collapsed under Clyde's whip. She saw Charlotte's pearls melting into ash. She saw fire where laughter now lived. She began to prepare, not loudly, not rashly, but in silence, the way she had always moved. In the days leading up to Mardi Gras, she had noticed where the kerosene was kept, heavy jars in the pantry. She knew how far a single lamp's flame could reach when fed with rags and oil. She knew the rhythm of the house when guests would be drunk, when the children would be asleep, when laughter would drown footsteps. The tools of her work became weapons. The lamp was not for light. It was for fire. The rags were not for cleaning. They were for burning. The pantry was not storage, so it was an armory. She gathered nothing that night yet, but in her mind she gathered everything. She mapped every hall, every room, every door. She pictured flames licking curtains, racing up staircases, curling into bedrooms. She pictured the screams. She pictured silence after screams, and she felt no fear, only certainty. The breaking point is not rage. It is clarity. Dinah did not act from sudden madness. She acted from years of memory, years of silence, years of wounds layered one over another until they formed a wall that could no longer hold. Charlotte's slap was the spark. Isaac's name was the strike. The wound of years was the tinder. And Dinah was the match. She walked back into the hall after cleaning the stain. She carried another tray, calm, silent, invisible once more. But in her chest burned fire unseen. Guests laughed again. Music resumed. Richard Beaumont raised his glass. Clyde Harper leaned back, smug. Charlotte adjusted her pearls, satisfied. They thought the night belonged to them again. But Dinah knew the truth. The night was already burning. They just hadn't seen the smoke yet. Every ember waits for a breath. Dinah had taken hers. The house would not survive it. Every rebellion begins in silence. Not in shouts, not in banners, not in open defiance. Silence first. Breath first. Memory first. Dinah carried silence like a cloak. The Beaumonts never noticed it. Why would they? To them she was invisible, a shadow passing with trays and buckets, a figure bent at the waist. But silence was her weapon. Silence let her watch. Silence let her move. Silence let her plan. And in February 1853, silence fed fire. The house before the storm. The big house was a monument to arrogance. Columns high as trees, walls painted white, doors carved from oak. To the Beaumonts it was pride. To Dinah it was weakness. She knew its skeleton. She knew its lungs. Wood that creaked in the night. Floorboards that swallowed sparks. Drapes that hung heavy with dust and oil. Richard Beaumont boasted that his house could outlast storms. Built to endure, he shouted to guests. But Dinah knew the truth. Fire eats endurance. Fire devours pride. The house was not stone. It was not iron. It was wood and cloth, fat and oil. It was fuel waiting for flame. Dinah saw it every day, though they never noticed. When she scrubbed the drapes, she felt the thickness of cloth. When she polished the banisters, she smelled the resin in the wood. When she poured oil in lamps, she watched it shimmer like a promise. They thought they owned her. They did not see she owned knowledge. Knowledge of the house's veins. Knowledge of its weakness. The nights of watching. After Charlotte's slap, Dinah did not sleep. Night after night, she walked the quarters and the kitchen, her body weary but her mind sharpened. She studied the house as others study scripture. She watched the guards. Clyde Harper strutted with his whip by day, but by night he drank until his eyes glazed. He trusted silence too much. Dinah saw when he stumbled. She saw when his head lolled. She watched the children. The Beaumont heirs, 2 boys and a girl, fell asleep quick, their dreams guarded only by wooden doors and drunken nurses. She watched when the candles burned low in their halls. She watched the pantry. Jars of kerosene lined the shelves like soldiers. Heavy, slick, patient. She touched one once, feeling its weight. A jar could birth an inferno. She watched the hearths. Flames smoldered even in sleep, kept alive by ashes and coals. To the family they were warmth. To Dinah they were seeds of destruction. Every night she carried images back into her silence. The plan grew like smoke inside her lungs. The memory of fire. Dinah was not the first in her blood to dream of flames. Her grandmother had told her stories. Hushed, trembling stories of uprisings in islands across the sea. Of slaves setting cane fields alight in Jamaica. Of smoke rolling over Saint-Domingue until the masters drowned in their own ash. Fire is the only tongue they understand, her grandmother had whispered. Dinah remembered the wrinkled face, the shaking hands, the eyes that carried both sorrow and pride. Fire was language. Fire was memory. Fire was justice. Now standing in South Carolina, Dinah carried that memory like a torch passed hand to hand across generations. The Mardi Gras mask. Mardi Gras was her cover. The Beaumonts adored spectacle. They prepared for weeks. Masks of feathers, gowns stitched in gold thread, casks of imported wine. Invitations traveled across counties. To celebrate the glory of the Beaumont name, Richard declared, strutting in his waistcoat. Dinah listened. She carried trays. She served tea. She kept her silence. But inside her silence laughed. Glory would burn. Masks would melt. The more they prepared to display wealth, the more vulnerable they became. Guests would fill the house. Servants would rush in chaos. Laughter and music would drown all else. It would be easy then, so easy, to light a match unseen. Fire spreads faster when no one watches, and on Mardi Gras night, no one would watch her. The tools of fire. In the days before Mardi Gras, Dinah gathered, not openly, not all at once, but piece by piece, rags torn from discarded linens, rolled and hidden beneath her apron. Kerosene, stolen in small sips, poured into bottles once used for medicine. A spoon here, a cup there, never enough to notice missing, yet enough to flood cloth. Candles, stub ends collected after feasts, hidden under floorboards. Memory, the sharpest tool of all. She hid these in the servants' quarters under straw inside cracked jars. Each item was nothing alone. Together they were apocalypse waiting. The moment of resolve. There is a difference between imagining fire and choosing it. Dinah knew this. Many nights she asked herself, could she bear the screams? Could she watch the children burn? Could she stand as death filled the house? And each time Isaac's face answered. Each time Mariah's silence answered. Each time the whip crack echoed. Each time Charlotte's hand rose. Dinah realized she was already burning inside. The house outside was only a mirror waiting to catch flame. Resolve came not in fury but in stillness. One night, standing by the kitchen hearth, she pressed her hand close to the coals. Pain seared her skin, but she did not flinch. She smelled her flesh burning, and she whispered, "Let it come." The final days. As Mardi Gras drew near, the house bloated with wealth. New drapes hung. Wine barrels rolled in. Masks and feathers cluttered tables. Richard laughed louder. Charlotte fretted more. Clyde sharpened his knife, drunk and boasting. The slaves moved like shadows, unseen but seeing all. Dinah alone carried a secret heartbeat. One evening she whispered to Ruth, the only one she trusted. "Ruth, the young girl with eyes too wide, voice too small. Stay away from the house when the music is loudest," Dinah murmured. Ruth trembled. Why? Dinah's eyes glowed with something fierce. Because silence breaks. Because fire remembers. Ruth said nothing more, but fear lit her face and hope flickered behind it. The night approaches. On the eve of Mardi Gras, the air itself felt thick. Smoke seemed to curl even where no fire burned. The fields lay silent under moonlight. The big house gleamed, windows shining like teeth. Inside, the Beaumonts prepared. Charlotte rehearsed her laughter. Richard boasted of his wine. Clyde drank before the first guest arrived. Dinah moved among them, silent, steady, her tray balanced as always. But her hands did not tremble now. Her silence was not submission now. Her silence was waiting. The Scheme house did not know it stood on the edge of its own grave. The house did not know its walls were already ash in Dinah's eyes. The house did not know Mardi Gras would not end in laughter but in smoke. The gathering fire was ready. The ember waited. The breath was near. Mardi Gras, 1853, South Carolina. The night opens with masks and laughter. Drums beat, wine spills, feathers tremble in candlelight. The big house glows like a lantern against the dark fields. Guests pour in, their carriages rattling, their boots stomping, their voices swelling. The Beaumont name is on every lip. Richard's laughter cracks like a whip. Charlotte's jewels flash. Clyde stumbles, already half drunk, boasting of his cruelty. They think it is their night of triumph. They do not see the ember in Dinah's eyes. The mask of service. Dinah moves among them as always. Tray in hand, head bowed. No one looks at her. No one sees her. That is their first mistake. She pours wine. She clears plates. She offers candied fruits. She listens to their boasts, their songs, their cruel jokes about slaves and whippings. She hears Charlotte laugh about the day she struck Dinah. She hears Richard brag about the yield of cotton bought by blood. She does not speak. She does not cry. She just waits. Each step takes her closer to the drapes heavy with dust. Each step brings her nearer to the pantry jars of kerosene. Each step lets her hand brush the hem of her apron, where rags and candles hide. The mask she wears is not feathers. It is silence. The spark, it begins in the pantry. No one sees her slip inside. The music swells, fiddles shrieking, voices roaring. Masks glitter. Feet stamp. Dinah takes the bottle she has hidden. Kerosene thick, slick, smelling of oil and death. She dips the rags, soaking them until they drip. Her hands move steady, not trembling. The rags are not for cleaning. They are for burning. She lights the first candle stub. Flame small, quiet, patient. She presses it into the soaked cloth. Fire catches with a hiss. The smell rises sharp. She does not cry. She does not pray. She just places it in the corner where sacks of grain and wood meet. She watches as flame crawls upward, licking greedily. The pantry will feed the blaze. The blaze will feed the house. The second flame. Dinah does not linger. She moves to the drapes in the hallway. Heavy velvet, red as blood, thick with dust. She pours a thin line of kerosene across the bottom, like a signature. Another rag. Another stub. Another flame. The fire eats fabric like memory eats silence. Smoke curls black, soft at first, then thicker. She inhales it deep. It smells like Isaac's freedom. Here it smells like Mariah's justice. She whispers their names. Isaac, Mariah. The drapes writhe. The hallway becomes tinder. The third flame. She moves to the stairwell. Wood polished by years of her own hands. She pours oil along the steps, careful, deliberate. Each step a coffin. Each step a grave. Another rag. Another stub. Another fire. The flames climb. They do not stumble. They rise like the voices of the dead. The music drowns the crackle. Inside the parlor, guests still dance. Fiddles scream. Boots pound. Laughter echoes. They do not hear the crackle. They do not smell the smoke. Not yet. Richard raises his glass. Charlotte twirls in her gown. Clyde bellows with drink. Dinah passes through them, invisible, carrying not wine but death. She remembers Isaac's face. She remembers the whip. She remembers Charlotte's hand. And she whispers again, Isaac, Mariah. Each name feeds the fire. The moment of discovery. It comes sudden. A child shrieks, not from flame but from smoke tickling their throat. Guests cough. Someone laughs, thinking it jest. Then the smell sharpens. Then the heat thickens. Charlotte freezes. Her jeweled hand trembles. Richard snarls, demanding servants act. Clyde curses, stumbling toward the door. Then the first scream shatters the night, the pantry erupting, the drapes collapsing in flame. Panic floods the hall. Masks scatter. Wine spills. Feathers burn. The big house has never known such noise. The fire takes hold. Flames race faster than feet. Velvet becomes torch. Wood becomes pyre. Ceilings groan, walls sweat smoke. The staircase becomes a river of fire cutting escape. Dinah stands in the chaos, tray fallen, hands empty now. She does not run. She does not shout. She watches. Richard shouts her name, not in respect but command. Dinah, water! Water. She does not move. She does not obey. She whispers instead, Isaac, Mariah. And the house answers with fire. The reckoning of names. The fire chooses its victims. Richard. Beaumont. His pride crumbles first. He shouts orders no one hears. He drags Charlotte by the arm, but smoke blinds him. He coughs, staggers, stumbles. A beam cracks above. Wood splits. The ceiling falls. Dinah watches as Richard vanishes in flame. Charlotte Beaumont. Her jewels glitter one last time. She screams Dinah's name, curse and plea at once. Her gown catches. Silk shrieks as loud as she does. Dinah does not move. Dinah does not cry. Charlotte's scream is swallowed by fire. Clyde Harper, the overseer, the whip hand. He tries to fight the blaze, crashing against walls, dragging chairs, roaring drunken orders. But fire does not fear him. His clothes ignite. He thrashes, rolling, cursing, begging. The whip falls from his hand. He burns with it. One by one, names fall into ash. Dinah whispers them all. Richard, Charlotte, Clyde. Each a drumbeat. Each a judgment, Emily. The children wail. Small voices, high and piercing. The guests scatter, trampling one another, fighting for doors that flames have sealed. The children pound at windows. Dinah feels her chest tighten. For one breath, silence falters. Could she let them go? Could she carry that weight? Then she remembers Isaac, a child once whipped till death. She remembers Mariah's unborn child, never given breath. Her face hardens. Her silence returns. The fire chooses all, she whispers. The children's cries mix with the roar of flame. The collapse. The house shakes. Beams split. Glass bursts. Flames roar louder than drums, louder than screams, louder than the fiddles that tried to bury memory. The big house, proud monument of the Beaumonts, bends. Its spine breaks. Roof crashes inward. Walls split outward. A fountain of sparks rains into the night sky. The fields glow red. The slaves in the quarters watch from shadows, faces lit by firelight. Some tremble in fear, some whisper prayers, some clutch hope in shaking hands. Dinah stands at the edge of the blaze. The heat lashes her skin. Her eyes burn but do not close. She does not cry. She just watches. The big house has never been so alive. The big house has never been so dead. The silence after the scream. When the last roof beam falls, when the last window shatters, when the last scream fades, silence comes. Not peace, silence. Heavy, suffocating, final. Dinah stands in it. Her body soaked in sweat, her face streaked with soot, her eyes glowing with the reflection of flames. She whispers one last time. Isaac, Mariah, Ruth. The names drift upward, carried on smoke. Memory carried to the sky. The reckoning is complete. The big house is gone, ash, smoke. Heat still breathing from the earth. The night that began with fiddles and feathers ends with silence thick as tar. The Beaumonts are no more. Their laughter burned. Their wealth melted. Their names now only embers whispered in the dark. But Dinah still stands, alone in the glow of ruin. Her body blackened with soot, her hair damp with sweat. Her hands empty, though the fire in her eyes still burns. The slaves silence. From the quarters, shadows move closer. Men, women, children. They stand in a ring, eyes wide, mouths closed. They know what has happened. They know who has done it. They do not cheer. They do not cry. They just watch Dinah, their silence heavy with awe and fear. Ruth clutches her arm, trembling. The girl whispers, barely a breath, "You did it." Dinah does not answer. Dinah just stares at the ruin. The smoke in the sky. By dawn, the smoke is seen for miles. Neighbors arrive on horseback, their faces pale, their mouths spitting curses. They shout of tragedy, of vengeance. They demand answers. The slaves are rounded, questioned, beaten. But they say nothing. Silence spreads from Dinah to them. Silence becomes shield. Still the truth glimmers in every eye. They all know. Dinah knows they know. But silence is stronger than rope. The capture, it does not last long. 2 days later, men arrive, sheriff, deputies armed with rifles. They storm the quarters. They drag Dinah out, chains clinking, irons biting into her wrists. The others watch but do not move. To resist is death. To speak is death. Their silence is the only weapon they have left. Ruth cries, her face pressed into her mother's dress. Dinah does not look back. She does not cry. She just walks head high into the irons. The interrogation. They beat her. They curse her. They demand names, accomplices, reasons. Did you set the fire? They snarl. Dinah's lips are cracked, bleeding. Her eyes swollen. But her voice is steady. The fire set itself. They slap her. Kick her. She does not scream. They demand again. Why? Dinah whispers one word over and over. Isaac. 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 The name becomes her drumbeat, her shield, her weapon. The trial without mercy. There is no real trial, not for a slave, not for a black woman. The court is theater, staged for vengeance. Witnesses speak, white neighbors angry and trembling. They tell of the blaze, of the screams, of the ruins. They point to Dinah, call her monster, call her demon, call her witch. The slaves are not allowed to speak. Their silence is forced this time. The judge declares guilt before the jury even breathes. For the crime of murder, for the crime of arson, for the crime of rebellion, you are sentenced to death. The gavel falls. Dinah does not flinch, but the waiting cell. She is placed in a cell. Stone walls, straw floor, one barred window. Chains bite her ankles. Nights pass slow. Rats scurry. Wind howls. Dinah does not weep. She stares at the moon through the bars. She remembers Isaac. She remembers Mariah. She whispers their names like lullabies. Sometimes she hears Ruth's voice outside, crying into the dark. Dinah closes her eyes, whispering back, though the child cannot hear, "Live, live, live, Dinny day." The execution. The day comes. Public. Spectacle. They want fear. They want a lesson burned into every heart. Crowds gather. Men jeer, women spit, children laugh cruelly. Dinah is dragged in chains to the gallows, her body bruised, her clothes torn. But her eyes, they still burn. The sheriff reads her sentence. His voice shakes, though he tries to hide it. "Any last words?" he asks. Dinah lifts her head. Silence hangs. Then she speaks, clear, steady, loud enough for every ear. "The house burned, not for me. The house burned for Isaac, for Mariah, for Ruth, for every whip, for every chain, for every scream you tried to silence. The fire remembers. The crowd erupts. Some boo, some cry out, some tremble. The rope is placed. The trapdoor waits. Dinah does not cry. She just closes her eyes. The floor falls. Silence returns, gown the fear left behind. Her body hangs, swaying. The crowd watches. Some cheer. Some spit, but many are silent, because the fire is still in their minds. The smoke is still in their lungs. The big house is still ash in their memory. Dinah's death does not erase it. Dinah's death makes it stronger, the whisper that spreads. In the quarters, Ruth grows. She carries the memory like an ember. She whispers Dinah's name in the dark. She whispers, "She did not cry. She just burned." Other plantations hear. Other slaves whisper. Stories spread like sparks in the wind. Dinah becomes more than woman. She becomes fire itself. The aftermath is not silence. The aftermath is echo. The aftermath is flame in every memory. Ash does not vanish. It lingers, it drifts, it settles into soil. It becomes part of breath, part of memory. Dinah's fire did not end at the gallows. Her rope could not silence what smoke had already carried. Her story spread, not by paper, not by courts, not by masters, but by whispers, by songs, by the trembling of children who grew into tellers. The whisper in the quarters, in the slave quarters. The name lived on, Dinah, Dinah, Dinah. Mothers whispered it as warning and as hope. Do not bow too low, do not forget Dinah. Fathers spoke it by firelight, their voices low but steady. The house can burn. Remember Dinah. Children, wide-eyed, repeated it, not fully knowing. Dinah lit the fire. Dinah burned the big house. The name became lullaby. The name became shield. The name became spark. The fear in the masters. White planters heard too. They whispered in dread. The Beaumont's gone in flame. A slave woman lit it. They tried to bury the story. They tried to make Dinah into a warning, obey or burn. They spread lies, called her mad, called her possessed, called her cursed. But fear does not erase memory. Fear feeds it. Every whisper of her name made masters glance at their own houses. Every crackle of fire in the hearth made them shiver. Dinah had burned more than wood. She had burned certainty. The story on the road. Fugitives carried the name north. Men who ran from fields whispered it in safe houses. Women who followed the stars spoke it to strangers who gave bread and shelter. Dinah of South Carolina, they said. She burned the big house. The name traveled with them, across rivers, across forests, across borders. In taverns in the north, abolitionists told it louder. They shaped her into symbol. Dinah, who chose flame over chains. Her name became part of speeches, part of pamphlets, part of sermons. What masters tried to bury became weapon against them. The memory in Ruth. Ruth grew. The girl who trembled in the quarters became woman with eyes of steel. She carried Dinah inside her chest. She told her children. She told them every detail, the drapes, the oil, the screams, the silence. She told them not with fear, but with pride. Your Aunt Dinah burned the house, she said. She burned it so we would remember we are not born to chains. She burned it so you would know fire sleeps in silence, waiting. Her children told theirs, and theirs told theirs. Through Ruth, the ember never died. The writing of history. Years later, after war, after emancipation, historians dug through ashes. Some found records of the trial, the execution. They wrote Dinah's name cold on paper. They framed her as criminal, as murderer. But others, black voices, freed voices, told it different. They told it as truth, as justice, as resistance. The big house fell, they said, because Dinah refused silence. In time, her name found pages of books, lines of songs, murals painted in shadows of Charleston and Columbia. Her fire walked into the future, the symbol. To some, Dinah was vengeance. To others, she was justice. To all who remembered, she was proof. Proof that the powerless could strike. Proof that the chains could break. Proof that memory can ignite. They called her arsonist. They called her murderer. They called her rebel. But Ruth's children called her something else. They called her free. The present echo, even now. If you walk through South Carolina, some say you can feel it. In the soil where the Beaumont house once stood, no mansion rose again. Grass covers ash. Trees bend in odd silence. Locals whisper it is cursed ground, not because of ghosts, because of memory. The fire left something that does not fade. The land itself remembers. The silence itself burns. The legacy. Dinah's rope broke her body. But not her name. Not her story. Not her fire. Her defiance fed generations. It whispered through Reconstruction. It marched with civil rights. It burns still in every voice that says no, in every hand that refuses chains, in every silence that hides fire inside. She was one woman, one slave, one night, one fire, but the echo is endless, Maya. The final reflection. If you remember Dinah now, remember this. She did not cry. She just burned. She did not beg. She just watched. She did not live to see freedom, but she lit its path in flames. The big house fell. The rope broke her body. But the fire, her fire, lives in memory. Because memory is ember. because silence is spark, because fire is forever. If this story strikes you, it is because the past does not vanish. It smolders, it waits, it burns again in memory. Subscribe, share, and carry Dinah's name. Carry the ember, carry the fire.